You're not responsible. It was wrong. Reach out to me. We'll connect you.
I will never see, speak, or hear from Aaron Smith Levin for the rest of my life.
I've been raised since the age of 4 to follow orders, do as I was told, or risk losing everything.
If we speak out, that's the only way they're going to get the strength to have the courage to do the same.
Why the hell someone have to escape to get out of a religion?
I'm still shocked by the evil. This is pure evil at work. Another extra Friday Scientology edition of Come and Get Some. It's going to be part 2 of Nora Crest, Why You Can't Be Gay in Scientology. And let me tell you, I listened back today, trying to edit it and get it out for you guys. Part 2 might be more impactful than part 1 on an emotional level, entertainment level, on every level, with the conclusion of my conversation with Nora. It's Inauguration Day. I can tell you, I'm not going to get too political, but it did look like Walter, the Jeff Dunham puppet, was being inaugurated today. I mean, I swear, he looks like Walter if he's got a toupee. Wait a minute. Have you ever seen Walter and Donald Trump in the same room together? Might be something to that. Well, anyway, before we get started with the interview, I want to go ahead and address the unstable level in the room. Last week, in the middle of my interview with Nora, I received a phone call to the show, which I don't usually receive phone calls because they're pre-recorded conversations except for the intro and outro, which I do live very clearly so. Kayla, young Kayla, called on behalf of the CCHR. That, of course, is the Citizens Commission on Human Rights. Also, the ones who put out the Museum of Psychiatry, the Industry of Death. So she has some things to say. She wanted to defend the CCHR. She wasn't actually, which I thought, wrongfully so, I thought she was claiming to represent the CCHR as a member, but she was just advocating. Turns out she's really tight-knit with Gemma Harris and John Alex Wood. Try saying that name without puking in your mouth a little bit. But there's a little bit of complication really getting a read on where she's coming from and what her state of mind is. I'm not making accusations or guesses or assumptions. I'm just trying to protect the integrity of this show as well as the integrity of young Miss Kayla. I wish her only the best. But don't you worry, Kayla, because I did promise you that I would address your concerns in a chat we had last week. And next week, I'll have a special guest where these concerns will definitely be addressed head on. To hear who that guest is going to be, stay tuned to the end of this part 2 of Nora Crest, Why You Can't Be Gay in Scientology. I think you're all going to like it. Here it is.
He's like, so you're lesbian now? Great. What? You know, and I was so ashamed of it and so still in the mindset of like, I'm a terrible human. I decided, of course, the real problem was I was 26 years old and I was a virgin. And so I needed to like, have sex. And that really turned out to be a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. Like, it's not like the movies where you just show up at a bar and like 5 guys want to take you home. Like that didn't happen. But my baby sister suggested that I go out with this guy, Cameron, who I had known in the Sierra. He was married to somebody else at the time, but we were friends. And I thought, we're friends, whatever. And we went out, and then, of course, we had sex. And that was like, a lot of stuff happened there. And then I decided, okay, this is the guy. I've had sex now. Now I want to have babies. And so a year later, we were dating for like a year, and we got married and had our first son. And then we had our second son. And then basically from like that time forward, so pretty much the last 7 years or so, in my mind, I started fighting off all of the things that I had felt before and going through a lot of just internal grief and angst at myself for now I'm married and I'm going to ruin all these lives and all these things and da-da-da-da. And then when my mom finally left Scientology in 2012, it took me and my sister, a decade basically of being insurgents in our own family to slowly sow the seeds with her, but she did leave. We decided to move from where we were living out to Ventura, just like fresh start, start over kind of thing. And when we moved here and I didn't have the pressure of like Scientology being in my face constantly, that was when I came to terms, like 100%, like, okay, I'm gay. And I told my husband, my ex-husband rather, and he was like, okay, I want you to be happy. And then it took me 2 more years after that revelation to be comfortable enough with myself to say, okay, I'm not just gonna be a gay woman who's married to a man who's living a celibate life. Like, I'm gonna go and actually be a lesbian. And it was very huge, but actually doing that was so freeing.
Right.
And it's like that. I'm not dating anybody, right? Ladies, I'm single, but because I'm such a prize catch with all this stuff I've just told you about myself. Just declaring that publicly and putting the video out, and Cameron and I basically, we told our children and everything. It's a lot of emotions, but we love each other very much. This is not an issue of like we hate each other, we can't stand to be around each other kind of thing. We basically saved each other from Scientology. We helped each other get out of it, and because of that, and because of our 2 children, there's a lot of love, and very much like Maria Bello. I don't know if you've read her book, Love is Love, which is great.
No.
But our family is basically like evolving into a modern family where obviously he's going to be dating people and seeing people, and I will eventually date people and things like that. And our family's just going to get bigger because he will always be a part of my family because he's one of my best friends. And obviously he's, my children's father. But again, I am so unbelievably fortunate that, I'm telling my husband of, let's see, in March, we would have been married 12 years, that, I'm gay, and his reaction was, okay, I just want you to be happy. He was like, that was literally his reaction. Like, I'm heartbroken that I can't be the person you want right now, but I love you so much, I want you to be happy. And I don't know how many people who've had that conversation with their husband.
I can't imagine.
That reaction.
Yeah.
So I'm blessed. I know it's a cheesy word, but it's appropriate. I'm blessed in that respect, where I have an incredibly loving and understanding family, and that has been there for me during my recovery and has encouraged me to seek help and actually seek out therapy. I mean, that was one thing Serge talked about last night. It was so powerful for me, but they didn't get into it enough, was the fact of him seeking out a therapist, because he and I spoke about it, and I said, the first time I went, I have Kaiser coverage, so they just like assign you a person. And I was like, okay, whatever. The guy they assigned me to literally looked like Santa Claus. Okay? he was like a 70-year-old, like 6'4" tall guy, white beard, white hair. He was so nice. So nice. I really can't overemphasize that enough. And he put me in his office, and the minute he shut the door to his office, I started my PTSD just kicked in full drive. I was like going over in my mind like 20 different scenarios how I could knock him out and escape if I needed to.
Wow.
That's what goes on in my mind. Like, if I go to a restaurant, I have to know where every exit is in the restaurant and have at least 4 escape plans in order for me to be comfortable, and which is why I frequent specific restaurants. Like, I get comfortable in places eventually, but it's an impulse reaction. If I go into a new place, I've already planned a battle and an escape at least 3 times in my head. Still no, to get out of there. So that's what I'm dealing with as a person. That's basically PTSD from that. But I had a panic attack with this guy just because he was a therapist who was listening to me. You know what I mean? Like, this is how much terror they put inside of you about therapy in Scientology, any therapy that isn't Scientology, rather.
Of course.
So it's a recovery process, and for me, it's been 14 years. Well, 15 now, and it's still going.
Well, don't sell yourself short. You say with all the stuff you're saying now, we all have baggage, but not all of us handle it as well, or as what's the word I'm looking for? Eloquently, as you have. You handle it pretty well. You are for someone who's been through what you've been, who's been that crazy Scientology person that people go like, why do I care? Idiot fell for it or whatever, which is the most horrible thing that people who don't No, we're not educated on it, let's say, but you're so well rounded that you're. I mean, I know there's flaws, there's work to be done, but I'm not calling you flaw. I'm just saying there's always going to be work to be done on all of us, and don't say it's so short. You're going to be fine. Really.
So I mean that's the hope, is that that I continue to recover. And obviously, because I have children, and I've said this publicly before, I truly believe that my children saved my life, because I was in a very dark place for many years after leaving the church, just being in this mind control trap. And after I had my first son, his birth was very dramatic. I was very much like, still Tom Cruising it up, like, I'm going to have a silent birth, and I'm going to have natural childbirth, and I'm not going to have any drugs, and I was like super hardcore about it. And I ended up, I had high blood pressure on the due date, which, is not a good sign. And I hadn't had it during the pregnancy, but they were like, we're going to have to induce you. And I was like, I don't care, but I'm not having an epidural. So to all the ladies out there who ever have a baby, don't do what I'm about to tell you. So for 45 hours of full induction on Pitocin, which basically takes your contractions to the maximum that they can be, every single contraction, and I had been having that now for about, out of those 45 hours, 20 plus of those hours were at full Pitocin, with no epidural. And the doctor came in to check me, and I'm thinking, let's pop this baby out, like, let's do it. We gotta, let's rock and roll. And she looks at me and she says, yeah, you're like 4 or 5 centimeters. You got like another 5 to 10 hours. And I looked at my mother and I was like, I'm gonna die. Like, I can't keep doing this. And she's like, no one said you can't get an epidural. Like, why don't you do it already? And so I said, hello, is the epidural guy still here? Did he leave? And so they gave me the epidural, which was like magic. And when we were hooked up to all, it was magic, because you have all these monitors on you, and you can see when the contraction's about to come. So Cameron's in there holding my hand, and he sees the graph start, like looks like an earthquake's about to happen. And he's like, okay, just squeeze my hand, just breathe. And all of a sudden, I'm feeling nothing, and I was like, I don't feel anything. I was like, oh my God, this is magic. But because I had exerted myself so long, 2 things happened. I spiked 103 fever, like another 4 hours later, and my son, his heart rate went up over 200. Ooh. So my OB, who was like, she was like the coolest cat in the world. She was like, listen, so we're going to just do an emergency C-section, and we're just setting up the OR, and don't you worry, it's going to be, super quick. It's going to be great, So they took me in there, and the C-section itself took 20 whole minutes, from start to finish. And he came out, and in the moment that I laid eyes on my son, we locked eyes, I had like my whole life flash before my eyes, just everything. And in that moment, I realized how much my mother loved me. Like, I had never really known how much until that exact moment. And I just started crying, and I felt so much love for someone that I had never, I'd been in love a few times, and I had never felt this type of love for another human. And that on its own, that connection that immediately happened with my son was something that was so important that no matter what was happening in my mind, I was like, no. Like, I just go away from me, bad thoughts. I have this baby, and he needs me, and I have to, like, be present for him. And so because of him, I know that I'm here today to talk to you. And if I hadn't had him, I don't know, honestly. I can't imagine the scenario where I would still be here.
So this brings up a question.
Scientology's control of me was so absolute still at that point, until that minute that I had my oldest son, Landon.
So that's what I was going to ask you, is because when you were in Scientology, your escape involved an attempted taking of your own life.
Yes, because when you're on the RPF, basically you're a scumbag, and you're like the worst person. They hide you away from the public. You're not allowed to speak to anyone unless spoken to. That includes your family. So if your family doesn't write you a letter, you cannot call them up and say, hey, Merry Christmas, or anything like that. And I had spent nearly 3 years there. They were attempting to reprogram me of my gayness. I had run away a couple times, and they brought me back both times. I had accumulated all of the injuries that I told you, 3 broken ribs, 2 herniated discs, getting electrocuted, and almost bleeding to death. And I realized that one night I was in the laundry unit, where you're literally washing the other RPFers, knickers and everything. And I was tossing bags of laundry down to this other girl. And the only thing you can do on the RPF for entertainment is tell jokes or reenact movies that you know by heart. So we were kind of like the people at the end of Fahrenheit 451 who are telling each other books. We were just telling each other the movies that we loved over and over. So I was doing a scene, I think, from Austin Powers or something, ridiculous. And she started laughing. And the person in charge of the RPF saw this interaction, saw me tossing bags of laundry to this girl, and I made her laugh. And he, looking at a total normal reaction between 2 humans, decided that that was me trying to seduce this girl. And he had me heavily interrogated, which during the interrogation I just started laughing, and I said, no, this is ridiculous. This is not Scientology. I'm not doing it. And I attempted to leave the interview. I was forcibly manhandled by, several people trying to shove me back in a chair, trying to keep me in the room. At one point, I had as many, I don't remember how many people. I just had hands all over my body holding my arms and my legs and smashing me into the ground. And I was commando crawling, just adrenaline fueled, getting away from these people, pounding on the door, trying to get somebody to open it to let me out. And then eventually somebody did come because they heard all the pounding. And as they opened the door, I don't know how it happened, but I used all the strength that I had to pry myself away, but I stupidly didn't run out of the building towards the fire department that was down the street. I ran to security, and I had no shoes and socks on. My feet and hands and my face were bloody. My nose was partially broken. I ran to security. I picked up the phone, and the security guard who answered was a guy I had known since I was 10. His name's Alex, and his response, I'm hysterical, and he says, stop bleeding all over my phone. That was his response to me. And then the next day, I was reprimanded by the person in charge of the laundry unit for about 45 minutes, where she stood, an inch from my face, screaming at me about basically how the world would be a much better place if I weren't in it, and I was just the most worthless piece of trash that had ever, dared to come out of the trash can. And I took her message to heart. I took myself away from her unit, and I just was hysterical, scrubbing walls and I was catatonic, just scrubbing these walls, not talking to anybody. Various people came to yell at me for the next 3 hours, again repeating, terrible, terrible things about me. And then I locked myself in a utility closet and drank bleach, because I knew that they were never going to let me go. No matter what, I was never going to be cured of being a lesbian, and I was just going to be in this hell for the rest of my life, and I couldn't survive it. And the only thing that I thought before I drank the bleach was, I'm sorry, Mom. And then I drank it, and it didn't kill me, but kids listening at home, do not do that. It burned my esophagus and my stomach, and their answer to that, when I could finally tell them what had happened, they did not call 911. They did not get me immediate medical attention. They gave me a quart of milk to drink. And then they tried to determine if I had actually tried to kill myself or if I was just being dramatic.
Oh, my God.
And when I said, no, not just being dramatic, they took me off of the base, because now I'm a security risk. I'm a PR risk for them. And Quinn Toffer, who was the medical liaison officer, put me in his car and pulled over at the Chevron station on the corner of Vermont and Los Feliz, or Las Feliz, as people in California say it, and called Dr. Megan Shields, who's the Scientologist and a doctor who was literally around the corner from where I was at, and told her what had happened. And she refused to treat me because I was a suicide risk.
Wow.
So she broke her Hippocratic oath because she's a Scientologist. And so they had to take me to the Olive View Medical Center, which is like a offshoot of UCLA Medical Center. They work in conjunction with them, but it's about 45 minutes, almost an hour away. So we get to the emergency room, and on the way there, Quinn is interrogating me about why I did this, and then coaching me into a short story that I'm rehearsing in the car so that I don't get put on a 72-hour psych hold for attempting suicide. So when we get there, Quinn is in the emergency room with me, and the doctor says to me, so what happened? And I was like, oh, I was scrubbing these walls, I was washing them with bleach, and I had like a bleach and water mixture in this Arrowhead bottle, but I also was drinking a bottle of Arrowhead, and I mixed up the two bottles, and oh my God, so dumb. I took an accidental little baby sip of the bleach water. And the doctor looked at me and he was like, that's the story we're going to go with?
Right.
And I was like, so then he asked me like 3 more times, and I repeated like verbatim the thing again. And then he looks at Quinn Toffer. Now, if anybody's seen a picture of me, I'm a brunette with like olive skin and brown eyes. And Quinn Toffer looks like, a poster child for the Aryan nation. And he says to me, who's this guy? I said, oh, it's my cousin. Like, there's no way we have any blood relations, like, whatsoever. So he knew something was up, this doctor, and, had I not been terrified to lose my entire family and everything, I would have, like, just said to him, this guy has kidnapped me, I drank fucking bleach to try and kill myself, please, 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 help me, call my mother, and looking back on it, obviously you can look back on any part of your life and relive it, like, if I had been brave enough at that point,
2020.
I should have done that.
Yeah.
Hindsight is 2020, but, obviously the good news is I made it and I'm here.
Yep.
And so I'm one of the lucky ones. There are many, too many, but there are many, specifically second generation, third generation Scientologists who have killed themselves because they got into a similar scenario that I did, where you're basically left with nothing, and you are so broken as an individual that your only out is to off yourself because you are so terrible, you're so unworthy of the earth, that's what you deserve.
No.
And that's what's terrifying to me. That's why I was not excited for Serge to tell his story, because his story is terrible.
Right.
And the fact that he's alive and he's walking and talking and even as doing as well as he is a miracle. All of us, I would say, second gen, third gen people, we are kind of miracles, each individual in our own right, because of what we were put through growing up and things like that. So, it's been interesting. I will say this: it's been interesting conversations with my mom since she left, because she really dove into researching Scientology at that point, and she read basically every book that had been written about the church from former members and stuff. And at one point, I think she was in the middle of John Atak's A Piece of Blue Sky, and she gathered me and my sister together, and she was crying, and she was like, you know what, I want to apologize to you guys. If I had really known what was going on and what Scientology was, you would have never set foot in a church. And when I tell my stories about things that happened, she gets very emotional, and she takes it very personally, and I said,
right.
Mom, I don't blame this on you. I blame it on, we were all in this circumstance together. We were all participating in it. And, this is just what happened, So it's not, there's no fault. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because what's the point? I could stare at my mom and be like, you're a fucking asshole and you did this to me.
Well,
like,
it's completely
okay,
unproductive.
Any better.
Completely unproductive, yeah.
Yeah, it does nothing. I mean, it's just that's, you just have to move forward from it. I mean, my mom's recovering from it too. She was in for 40 years. That's 40 years of her life that she spent believing this stuff, doing these things and stuff. That's a lot of baggage to carry around.
Yeah.
And and guilt and things like that. And so we work with each other on our recovery and things like that. And the fact that I did attempt suicide is very serious. But that shows also the deadly seriousness and how I'm just searching for the right word here, but, you know, how truly evil Scientology is. Because if I were the only person that had ever attempted suicide to leave, then you'd just be like, well, this girl's dramatic.
It's an isolated incident, yeah.
Yeah, but it's not. But it's not, and that's the scary part, and that's what I wish they would have gotten into last night. Because there's so many stories to tell. It's like peeling an onion, you know what I mean? And that's why Leah's show is so powerful right now, because she can dedicate an hour to one aspect of the crazy and talk about just that. Like the first, you know, episode talked about statutory rape, where Amy Scobie told her story, and then when they interviewed the Headleys, they were talking about forced abortion. I know so many girls that were in that scenario, so many that were teenagers and even, you know, young women forced to have multiple abortions so that they could keep working for Scientology. I mean, who does that? Who does that? I mean, it's so insane. You know what I mean? If you're working anywhere, you're working at a 24-hour fitness, oh, I got pregnant. Oh, well, you better go get that handle, girl, because you got to be in here training people.
Right.
You know, like, what?
That's not a thing, yeah. And in real life, that's not a thing. I want to ask you though, because what I was trying to get at is, you tried to end your life while you're in Scientology because you felt like there was no other place to go, and that you were the dirtiest, the lowest of the dirt, and that stayed with you so long that it took until the birth of your son to give up those thoughts. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah. Basically, it took that was 3 years of time in between those two things, almost exactly 3 years. And
unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, it took, and so basically, I mean, I was living, you know, life just with like a cloud, you know, like Pigpen with the cloud of dust, like a cloud of negative thoughts around me at all times, thinking about what a terrible human I was because I wasn't, you know, helping all of mankind, and I wasn't, you know, doing things. Like I was like, well, maybe I should join the police academy or something, but I couldn't physically. There's no way I could have physically done it. And then, of course, I would have to lie on the psychological thing and just say, oh, no, I wasn't really trying to kill myself.
Oh, that's true. They ruined you, basically, with everything.
Yeah. No, I'm not qualified for that job.
You couldn't do it if you wanted to. You probably now, at this point in your life, you probably could handle it and do a good job. But with all the crazy stuff that's going on in the world, there's no way anyone's going to give you that chance.
I've thought about 5 different careers that I would love to go in, like emergency medicine. You know, I'm good in a crisis, but thinking about helping people with cuts and, you know, like injuries and stuff, that's the easy part. The part that I think would be very terribly hard for me is the pressure part. And it's not that I would ever be treated the same way that I was treated in the Sea organization, with people screaming obscenities at me, and you know, things like that, because people in real life don't do that. You know, it's called human decency, and also they can be fired.
Exactly.
Like that. You know,
exactly.
against the law. So I'm not worried about that. But I realized because of the PTSD, honestly, when I get into a high pressure environment, I have to really do a lot of Zen breathing and exercises to calm myself. And so for that reason, I wouldn't be good. But when I was on the RPS, I mean, one time a girl came in. I just happened to be in the office when she came in, but she was doing construction, and somebody was carrying some tracking stud that was metal, like on their shoulder, and had come around a corner real quickly, and this tracking stud had basically sliced her eyebrow essentially off of her face, and it was like hanging down. So she comes in, she's bleeding, everyone's freaking out. I said, okay, let me look. I cleaned it up. We had some butterfly bandages, and I really made sure that I put her eyebrow basically back where it was supposed to go, and she did get taken to the emergency room because it was bad. I was like, she has to go to the emergency room. She needs actual stitches. So they took her, and when she came back, she said to me, she goes, the doctor was really impressed with how you bandaged me up. I said, really? He said, yeah. They asked basically had a professional done it. You know, I took a first aid class in high school when I was a lifeguard, so all that data stuck with me.
Mm-hmm.
But so I can confront that. I can, you know, I didn't get sick or anything like that. I didn't feel like, oh, you know, people see blood, they get freaked out. But being in an environment where I'd have to be, so much pressure would be demanded of me on a constant basis, you know, an emergency room is a very high pressure environment. I don't think I would do. I think I would just shut down mentally. You know what I mean? And so that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
But I have to be. But I'm at a point now where I'm okay with that. You know what I mean? Like where I'm okay with. Guess what? I have a limitation, and I can be okay with that limitation and not beat myself up about it. And that's a huge step.
Well, don't beat yourself up about it, but I wouldn't be okay with the fact of why you have that limitation. Is a big, huge crime against humanity issue. I mean, everything that I'm hearing is crimes against humanity. I just on my last podcast compared Scientology to a terrorist organization, and I don't think that's too far off.
No, because it's not. Because it's the guilt for not helping all mankind. Like I honestly, like no shit. When Katrina happened, I was pregnant with my oldest son, and I was 7 months pregnant when Katrina happened, and my impulse was to get on a plane and go and get in a boat and help these people. And my mother and my ex-husband are looking at me like, you're an insane person. You're 7 months pregnant.
Yeah.
Your only problem is growing this human inside of you. And I was like, but look at all these people. I gotta go help them. I can't not help them. Like I was beating myself up because I was living in California and I was pregnant and I wasn't on a boat helping people recover, get out of their houses. Like I was thinking of all the people that had I gone, I would have saved that wouldn't be dead. I mean, it's like that's the ridiculous.
The ultimate guilt trip.
Yeah, because you never don't give yourself a guilt trip. Anytime a natural disaster happened, the tsunami in Thailand. Oh, I should have been there. I could have saved those people. Really? I could have saved those people? How was I a fucking tsunami? How am I gonna save people?
Right.
Fuck that. You know what I mean? But that's the craziness that gets ingrained in you. Because you really believe all of mankind is your responsibility, I mean, I was on the RPF when 9/11 happened, and I was like, well, I better go join the Army now to go fight the terrorists because, got to go save all mankind. I mean,
Now, I imagine there were some people who lied, who were homosexual and said, you know what, I'm cured. And they answered all the questions right on their e-meter, and they moved on.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. I mean, because let's face it, at some point when you're being tortured, you do realize, like, if I just say what they want to hear and I convince myself that is true, all of this pain and terribleness is going to stop, and I want it to stop.
I'm real concerned about the fact that they come out of, because when you're in the RPF, I guess if you're in there, or if you're in a hole, or if you're in Sea Org, you're kind of contained within those walls, so you're easy to control. But when you go out on your own and you blow, is the terminology, when you're blown and you go out and they come to your home to physically take you back, all of a sudden that becomes not freedom of religion, which is what they're hiding behind in the court of law. That becomes kidnapping, and I imagine that's enforceable when they come to your home like that. And I don't know why that doesn't get enforced more, except for the whole, I guess I have to go back,
It's partially the individual person saying I have to go back, but it's also the families involved. It's a rule in Scientology that you are not allowed to sue another Scientologist, and that includes calling the police on another Scientologist. You are expected to always handle any disagreement, whether legal or otherwise, with another Scientologist via the Church of Scientology itself or an arbitration company which is run by Scientologists. And that's your only recourse. So let's say you're a Scientologist and another Scientologist asks you to invest in their Ponzi scheme, which you don't think is a Ponzi scheme because they're a Scientologist. But you invest money. Yeah. You invest a shit ton of money in this Ponzi scheme, and this person takes you for a ride, and they've just stolen hundreds of Scientologists' money. Now, those hundreds of Scientologists who have a legal case against this person are not allowed to combine together and file a class action lawsuit and get this guy thrown in jail and somehow recover some money. Instead, they have to go to the ethics department at their local org and write reports that then get reviewed, and then this guy gets called in, and he's like, I was trying to help, and it just didn't work out. And then, he does some, phony baloney amends project, which usually involves donating massive amounts of cash to the International Association of Scientologists, which is the richest of the front group. And then all is forgiven. You lost all your money? That's your fault. You should have, anything that happens to you in Scientology that's bad,
it's your fault.
Is your fault. Something you did wrong. And anything that happens to you in your life that's good is because you use Scientology. So.
Wow. So what I want to do here, you've made some great. You've been great. I don't want to keep you too long, because I know you have other things going on. I'm holding you pretty long here. You have I have a life. The confrontation's on. The war without guns. Very dramatic. The the whole thing with this is you've been great. You told you pretty much. It's unbelievable what you said, and it should carry more weight, and it should get more exposure. And I'm sorry that they cut you off of 2020. I'm hoping a lot of people who didn't see in 2020 catch you here. When I end my interviews, I usually do something called 10 questions, a little way to unleash the stress of the issue. 10 questions is goofy questions. Some of them might be deep, some of them are fun. And if you don't like a question and don't want to answer it, you can pass, of course. But before we wrap up with 10 questions, I do want to ask you, I want to actually talk about something real quick that you touched on, because I think it's important. And I'll probably end up doing a whole entire show about it. I think it warrants an entire show, but the whole pedophile issue. It's real. It's legit.
Yeah.
You say, and you specifically say, homosexuality is lower on the tone scale, less likely to move forward than a pedophile.
Yes.
All right, and it seems to me that I've seen some reports that I should record names and try to contact people. I know it's going to be real tough to get people to want to talk about such a thing, especially if they're a victim. But the whole thing with that is, if you are underage, if you're 7, 10, 14, and you have an encounter with somebody, it's your fault because of a past life. Something you did that brought that on.
Or something you did in this life, even if you're that young. It could just be because, your tongue...
you ate those cookies?
Lies in school, or just something stupid like that. It doesn't even have to be, you're an intergalactic overlord from 10,000 years ago who blew up a planet. It doesn't even have to be like, that bad.
What really disturbs me is this is actually this is actually verified. In my opinion, and I guess I can see Scientologists spinning it, but it's verified in Dianetics. And I know you've seen that excerpt floating around, and you've read it, from L. Ron Hubbard's own words in Dianetics, that if a 7-year-old kid, a female 7-year-old pulls away from a grown, older man, even if it's a passionate kiss, she shouldn't be pulling away, basically, or there's something wrong with her from her past.
Right, like why does that freak her out that she's 7 and a 50-year-old guy is shoving his...
Why would that be free? Oh, that'd be weird.
Why would that be weird?
Right, so it's really strange how that's acceptable, and it's really telling the mindset and the mentality when you're inside. That Kirstie Alley, I sent that excerpt to her on Twitter, and I got blocked immediately.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, it's like, well, this is irrefutable.
The one thing Scientologists will not tolerate is using Scientology to point out to them that Scientology is crazy.
Which is crazy in itself. So put yourself in, and I know this is kind of a cruel thing to ask you. It really does seem like a cruel thing to ask you, but putting yourself back in those days, you've been taken back to RPF. You left, you escaped, you blew, you got pulled back in, ribs were broken, you're hurt, you're bleeding. Somebody contacts you and says, "Hey, what's the story with Zeno?" How do you respond?
Oh, well, at that time I was not OT3, so I would have just been like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Okay, so let me go back to, let me say, all right, good point.
That would have been my honest reaction, because I would just be like, that can't possibly be true.
So I ask you, what about the fact that it's been reported that L. Ron Hubbard never had any of these degrees they say he had? What do you make of that?
I would have had a visceral reaction at that time. I still would have been like, you're a lying piece of crap.
Where'd you get that from? Wiki?
Yeah, like, why would you even know what Wikipedia is?
Right.
Point. I mean, I honestly did not understand the internet, which that would be another podcast for my interactions on Yahoo Chat when I first got off Scientology.
Oh.
I did not understand, like, rules and, talking to people.
Just regular common
my webcam
conversation.
Meant. Like, I got I kept saying yes to that.
Don't say yes to that.
Don't say yes when someone offers to show you their webcam.
Yes,
But,
especially the kids. Yes.
I was basically like a kindergartner. You know what I mean? I had never had a cell phone. I had never been on the internet. It was 2004, 2002 rather. So the internet was still kind of in its own infancy, but it was pretty well established at that time. It was weird if you didn't have an email address. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You had to relearn.
That. Yeah, I mean, I had to learn all of these things. But my reaction, even despite the physical and mental abuse I'd gone through, I still, even at that time, still believed in L. Ron Hubbard. I still believed that he had discovered these things and that everything he told us was true. Everything he told us about himself, everything he told us about his discoveries. Even if you had shown me actual paperwork that showed that he was lying, I would have been like, you just made that up. That's Photoshop.
Well, that's the funny thing about that is that I totally forgot what I was going to make my point on. I'm sorry. So I totally forgot.
Well, I answered the question.
You did answer the question. You answered it very, very well, and I was so into your answer that I lost my track of thought, but that's fine. I'm going to kick myself later for not bringing... Oh, I wanted to say, okay, yes. It reminds me. It does remind me that people like yourself, people like myself even, probably now, Tony Ortega, all these people, are called religious bigots and haters. They're spreading hate. Can I tell you, I haven't seen a word, not even... I don't know who's who when I look out there. I don't know these people personally. There's a ton of community on social media that's anti-Scientology now, speaking out.
Right.
Some of them might be just looking for something to get excited about. Some of them might be just like, the housewife that follows, the trial of the century, like nobody else follows it. And they might be overly enthusiastic. I get that, and I'm okay with that, but it's different than the people who are actually trying to do something and actually like really have a legitimate concern. But I haven't heard a single person say a hateful thing. I have not heard anything hateful.
No, because the thing about it is in Scientology, anything that you say that is not Scientology is the salvation of all mankind and L. Ron Hubbard is a genius is considered evil.
Yeah, and that should be concerning.
Just the thing that you pointed out to me, like just the quote from Dianetics where you're like, why is this okay in your religion that your leader is talking about a grown-ass man shoving his tongue down a little girl's throat and she's supposed to be okay with that?
But Nora, it's a philosophy. It's not literal. Like maybe there wasn't Noah's Ark. Maybe that's a parable. But here's the thing about that.
So they get into and they deflect. But it's like when you point out specific things. I mean, if somebody had the time, which would really be a lot of time because this man talked a lot. And he wrote a lot to go through everything. He has something negative to say about everyone, about African American people, about Asians, a lot of negative things to say about women, homosexuals, negative things about children. There is not really a topic or person in humanity that he didn't tear down in some way, on tape and in his own writing. So this is all him. It's not like you're interpreting his writings as something. He's literally saying these things. So
yeah.
He was a racist, misogynistic, paranoid, schizophrenic homophobe who started a cult and unabashedly admits if you want to make money, you got to start a religion. And
yep.
That's a quote from him.
That's an exact quote. Yes.
That's an exact quote from him. And that's really what it's about. And David Miscavige has taken that idea and turned it up to 11. Yeah, he just cranked it right up to 11 and, is making even more money than L. Ron Hubbard could have dreamed of. And it's that's what's really scary is that he's doing it all under the cloak of religion, much in the same way that these mega church pastors make that same kind of money, with the 10,000 people in the audience and then hundreds of thousands of people listening to them at home.
Yeah.
Every
Evangelists.
one of those people donate $1, that's $10,000 a pop. Boom, boom, boom.
Easy money. I feel like the government needs to step in because, I know the church tries to hide behind the church, quote unquote church, hides behind the whole religious freedom thing. But like I said before, if they were filleting people alive on the front lawn of Flag, outside the front of the building of Flag, I'm pretty sure law would step in, regardless of religion. But that's our religious doctrine. We fillet people alive on the front doorstep of Flag.
because of the silence that's enforced, there aren't any cases out there to set precedent for, doing something about it. There are hundreds of kids who this happened to, and in some cases, their abusers are dead now, but I would say in a majority of the cases, the abusers are still not only alive, but very active in the church itself. And because of the silence that's enforced, I don't know what the laws are on child abuse, the statute of limitations and things like that, but I would hope that there isn't a statute of limitations, and so that people like Serge, who are survivors of sexual abuse, and the other second and third generation Scientologists who are out there on the fringes of the internet, if you're listening to this, my only recommendation is to band together in numbers and tell the dirty, terrible truth of what happened to you, and make a case about it, because this could be something amongst the many, many other things that Scientology is doing that are nefarious and evil, that could bring the church to its knees, because there are hundreds of children. I mean, this is like Spotlight, you know what I mean, type of situation, where they cracked open, the Boston Archdiocese and found this huge pattern of child abuse in the Catholic Church. It's very similar to that. It's eerily similar. Like when I saw that movie, I was thinking, this could be just made exactly about Scientology, and it would be the same scenario.
I feel like I learned a lot from Monique England last night. I think if I'm ever at work and I fail to do something or refuse to help somebody and I get in trouble, I want to take it to the top. And when the top boss says, "Look, why are you bringing this to me? He filed a report. This is what happened." I'm just going to say I totally would question his credibility, and you should too. Yeah. That's how I'm going to answer every criticism the rest of my life. Is I question the credibility of the person that made that claim, because that's apparently legally binding. I want to know.
Scientology.
I want to know how you feel about real quick, because Bert Leahy brought this up in our interview. He's the camera guy that followed around Marty. The question I have is, how do you feel about people who practice Scientology on their own, away from the strict doctrine of the church?
Oh, you're trying to set me on fire here.
Oh boy, did I just light a fuse?
No, this is a controversial topic. This is how I feel about them. If they are adults and they are practicing Scientology on themselves or another consenting adult, this is America, and you can practice Santeria on yourself if you want, or Satanism, and that's fine. When it involves children, I draw the line, because children are, my kids are super smart, and I'm not trying to downplay the intelligence of children, but children are not at a point where they can make an informed decision about their spiritual destination. And, of course, I don't care what environment you're raised in, whether you're raised Jewish, Catholic, Episcopalian, Scientologist. When you're a kid, you believe what your parents tell you. You believe in Santa Claus, you believe in the Tooth Fairy, and you also believe whatever doctrine they give you about the hereafter and eternity and God. And when you have a technology like Scientology that is so destructive, that is so harmful, it is child abuse, in my opinion, to do that in any way to children. And I'm talking about the things that people are like, well, what about a cis? Like, no, that's brainwashing. You cannot do it. You cannot do the Purif. You cannot do study technology. You can't do any portion of Scientology. None of it has benefit. And I've had debates with people who like to call themselves Independent Scientologists. And I abhor that term, because the truth of the matter is, if you are studying, using, believing in the technology of L. Ron Hubbard and Scientology, then you're a Scientologist. Whether you're in an actual church of Scientology or you're in your backyard with your friends doing it, you're a Scientologist. An anti-Scientologist, or ex-Scientologist, as I refer to myself, is someone who's the complete opposite of that. We do not use Scientology. We do not study it. We do not apply it in our lives to ourselves or other people. We reject everything about it. We're like, Scientology is a no thank you. And we're here to say, this is what Scientology actually does. Here's the actual results from doing Scientology. It is harmful. It is a terrible thing. So, I cannot tell people who are practicing Scientology outside of the Church of Scientology on themselves, I could tell them, I think you're just continuing your own brainwashing and you're not benefiting yourself, and, please get some help and do some research. And I've tried that approach, and it doesn't work. So the only thing I can say is I think they're wasting their time and their money because they do charge each other money for these things.
Right. Still in the thousands, but lower than Scientology.
I'm sorry for them that they haven't recovered from it. Like, that, to me, and I understand it in some ways. Like, my mom was in for 40 years, and part of her recovery process was cherry-picking things that had benefited her, or she had a good time doing, or she felt she had really helped someone doing. And as we've discussed the results of Scientology and the actual, like, things that are going on when you're doing processes and stuff, she has bit by bit let go of these things. And it really is a hard process because, especially for people who, have been in it 30, 40 years, you're just now to say to yourself, I wasted 40 years of my life. I threw that away on a piece of shit. Like, who does that? And that's a lot to take in. So I think people really can't let it go. It has benefits. It's helped them. No, Scientology has not helped you. You have helped yourself.
Exactly.
Every decision you made was your decision. It was not because of Scientology or L. Ron Hubbard. And that's the thing that people have to, it's a crutch. They can't take, because Scientology teaches you that. Nothing you do that's good is because of you. It's because of Scientology. And everything bad that happens to you is because of you.
Only Scientology.
So only Scientology is good and you are bad. So therefore you couldn't have made any good decisions because only Scientology makes good decisions,
Yeah.
It's a lot of mind control and evil to get over. It's also a lot of years of dedication to something that these people cannot let go of. So, my politically correct answer is, have fun doing it to yourself and other consenting adults. But if I found out there was a group of independent Scientologists indoctrinating children, that's it. No.
Yeah.
I will speak out against that.
I feel you on that.
It's so unbelievably harmful to be indoctrinated in that as a child.
Gotcha. So that is a strong statement. I'm going to go ahead and get into 10 questions with you here.
Okay, let's do it.
And I like that answer. The answer is pretty good. I always feel like, hey, whatever you want to do as long as you're not hurting anyone. But when like you said, when it comes to hurting anyone, especially children, that's an issue. 10 questions. Number 1, describe Monique Yingling in one word.
Well, what I said to, I'll repeat what I said last night to a few friends of mine. I said she looks like a sex doll that was melted in a fire and then had makeup slapped on it.
That's about 25 words, but I'll take it. That's a great answer. It's too good. I have to take it. Number 2, think fast. True or false? DreamWorks based the Minion on David Miscavige. True or false?
Oh, I hope that's true. That'd
be hilarious. Number 3. This is a fill in the blank. Without blank, you'd be lost.
Oh. Well, besides my kids, I'm going to say pizza, for sure.
Pizza's good.
Fuel of the soul.
Number 4. I don't know if you're going to be able to answer this. Name one good thing about Scientology.
Oh, God.
Nothing is an acceptable answer, by the way.
I met my husband, and we have 2 beautiful children because of that, even though he's my ex-husband.
I like that you have a positive answer about that. That's awesome. That's really awesome. Number 5, you're a movie person. You love movies. You have a whole podcast you do about, I guess, trashing movies. But it's what's that podcast called that you do, by the way? I listened to it last night.
That's one of the 2 podcasts I'm on. Soiled Restrooms Cinema. We watch terrible movies and talk about it. And then I have another podcast that I'm on, the Talk Amongst Ourselves, which is me and Colleen Griffin, we talk about Saturday Night Live. So it's positive because we love Saturday Night Live.
It's pretty funny because I've already heard your Soiled Restroom one first so far. I listened to it last night on the way home, or I guess it would be this morning on the way home. And as I'm listening to it, it's funny. It's kind of like Mystery Science Theater, which is one of your favorites I read because I do research. The mystery, it's like Mystery Science Theater after the fact, and I like that the main host actually documents the minutes. That's pretty good. But back to the question, because you're a movie buff. Number 5, what was your favorite movie of the year last year?
Ooh, favorite movie of the year last year. Ooh. Ooh, that's a good one. Boy, now I have to remember all the movies. You know, one of the last ones I saw that became a favorite of mine was Arrival.
Arrival. I haven't seen it yet.
Oh God, this movie was so good, and I really am surprised more people haven't seen it, and it's not nominated for a lot of stuff. But it was a very powerful film. I enjoyed the hell out of it. It was really good.
Excellent. All right. Number 6. What was the last thing you ate?
I'm still eating. It's a piece of banana bread, and it's delicious. It's homemade.
Sounds delicious. Number 7. True or false? You have heard of people leaving, and they decided to on their own because it just wasn't for them, and they don't have any complaints or any concerns when it comes to Scientology. True or false?
Oh.
Have you ever heard any stories like that? Because I've been looking, and I can't find one.
Well, I would say that's true, only because at one point, because I worked at Celebrity Center, they were, crew morale was real down, and so they pulled out all these folders of people who had done like ass service in Scientology, and they were of all these famous people who I'm not going to out because no one should be shamed for doing like one thing in Scientology and then leaving. But they were like saying, look at this person. They got this process on this date, and then look what movie they booked right after. That's how powerful Scientology is. They just did one thing, and now they're a super movie star.
Right.
So I would say those people were just kind of like, no, thank you.
Yeah.
And they went on with their lives, and they never said anything.
I don't know if that counts though, because it doesn't sound like they were as indoctrinated.
A regular human, like a regular person. No, I have never.
A regular human. I like it. Number 8. You have 3 DVRs full of TV shows. So what's the best TV show ever?
Oh God, that's a terribly tough question.
A lot of TV shows.
If the best TV show ever that I've ever seen, I'm gonna say Newsroom, and I can't emphasize enough how much we need this show back on the air, Aaron Sorkin. Like right now in Trump's America, we need this stuff.
Does it sort of just clarify things that are a little foggy in the media and things that you see? It kind of puts a spotlight on it.
It was it just was so brilliantly written, and it took on so many topics from a broad range of viewpoints that I miss it. I miss that show. I miss the characters. I mean, I obsessively watch things. Westworld is really good right now.
Westworld,
changed my life this year. Stranger Things was the best show that happened on 2016. That's hands down.
Nora, do you ever go to a restaurant has like the neon lights and all you think is Stranger Things when you look at the neon lights? I do that. I go by Longhorn. I see the red. Oh, yeah. I hear the theme.
My South Park Stranger Things. Somebody drew the Stranger Things characters as South Park people. I'm actually wearing that right now.
You need to take a selfie and post it. I want to see that. And then I'll put it in the scroll next week when your interview airs. I'll have it in there. Raging Buddha. What is the significance? I know there's going to be a reference to something that I'm missing here.
Well, basically, it was. It's actually a reference to Raging Bull. And so I feel like when I first started getting out of Scientology, I had a lot of anger, which still pops up for me time and time again. And I did look to Buddhism, specifically Zen Buddhism. I started reading a lot of books about it. But one guy in particular really kind of spoke to me, and that's Brad Warner. He's an American Zen Buddhist, but he was also a punk rocker. And so his books are very funny and very American, I would say, in how he delivers the teachings that he received. And he breaks down Zen Buddhism and its history and stuff very, very, very well. And his latest book that he just wrote is called Don't Be a Jerk. And
I like it.
Kind of how he approaches it. Yeah, I really like it. If anybody out there, read Brad Warner's book. He's amazing. But that was the first thing that helped me was actually starting to meditate and being more present and not allowing my past to be on top of me all the time. But I was still very angry about my past. So I just thought I'm a raging Buddhist.
Nora,
I'm not Zen.
Nora, we're angry about your past. Everybody's angry about your past. It's ridiculous. That's why there's efforts in place. Number 10. I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this question. True or false?
Okay.
You did this interview for money and fame.
totally true. I'm cashing the check later.
$5 check is in the mail. I think I can do $5.
I've enjoyed this interview very much, talking with you now for 14 hours.
It feels like a little bit. It's gonna be split up.
I'm so sorry. I talked so much, but
it's okay.
no, I'm definitely not getting any money for this, and I'm happy to do it for free because truth should be free.
Absolutely, absolutely. In closing, let me ask you. Some people see you as a lesbian, and people in Scientology see you as an SP. Who do you see yourself as? Who is Nora Crest? What are you?
Oh my goodness. Do you have another hour? No. That's like, these are like, last question. What's the meaning of life?
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I would say my view of myself is evolving constantly, but right now I see myself as a strong woman who's a mother of two very intelligent, strong, feminist sons who is trying her best to, live her best life in its truest form and help as many people as she can, including herself. So that's if I'm going to talk about, that's what I see.
That's awesome. That's very awesome. Is there anything else that you want to say in parting ways here?
Oh my goodness, thank you so much for letting me talk about all this stuff, because I'm just happy to get the information out there, and I encourage everyone, even people who haven't been involved with Scientology, please do some research, and if you know Scientologists, just sit them down. Please get them to watch Leah Remini's show or Going Clear, and just do it from a place of love, and help them to recover from this craziness, because people do need help.
Right. Every voice is important, and I'm an outsider that is doing this because it just seems like the thing to do, like the right thing to do. And
I appreciate that, because there's not a lot of people that are brave enough to stick their neck out to do that have had nothing to do with it. So thank you.
No problem at all. It's like I said, it just feels like the right thing to do. I've been, I talk about it. I don't have to take your time up with it, but just to summarize, I saw this special by John Sweeney. I talked about it before, and I saw the Lisa McPherson thing back in the early 2000s, and that nothing had been done till now. This shocks me, and now I have a podcast. So yes, it's not gonna go. No one's gonna forget now, and that's the whole idea of it. And your voice is uniquely important, and you just have, I think now, I don't think you need to be told, but you have a very important role in all of this, and you're hugely important. So just know that.
Thank you.
No problem. So thank you for doing the show. Thank you for talking to me and being so open. Everybody, I guess, has been so open and honest. I just wish I could get you guys to sit down and get the guys in Scientology to sit down in the same room with like an impartial moderator. And then that'll never happen, but it would be amazing.
No, I mean, I have offered multiple times to on air live debate Danny Masterson on anything in Scientology, and he has never accepted.
I mean, how can you put Mike Rinder in a room across the way from Mike Rinder's ex-wife with a moderator, and how can her complaints and issues stand up? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
How can that? How's that going to work? That's why it doesn't happen. So
yeah. Thanks
again. I could talk forever about this. I know you have a place to be, and I really do appreciate you being here. You said it was like 14 hours. I said it felt like it, but it felt like one of the most enjoyable 14 hours and important 14 hours. So thank you again.
Oh, good.
All right, Nora. We'll stay in touch. You take care.
You too.
All right, that was the amazing and brave and very very outgoing Nora Crest with their honest and true story of what she experienced within Scientology and since Scientology. So the best to Nora, and I hope that's not the last I'll speak to her. She's been awesome. So I promised you an announcement for next week's show. Next week on Friday will be another special extra. Come get some Scientology edition with the lady you saw in 2020, A War Without Guns, licensed therapist and cult professional. She doesn't like to be called an expert, but with specialist Rachel Bernstein. That's right. You saw her on 2020, and she's been on with Chris Shelton on his Critical Thinker at Large. She'll be on this very show. We talked last night. It was a great conversation, and I think you're going to really enjoy it. And like I promised, we'll address some of those issues about the fight against psychology and the whole industry of death thing, and we'll address that all next week right here on Come Get Some.
Hey, this is Chris. Thank you for checking out the YouTube version of one of my audio interviews. If you'd like to see more, leave in the comments which ones you'd like to see next. Believe it or not, this is not a cash-generating venture for me. I do this on my own, and it's a lot more work than it looks. So please show me that you appreciate the fruits of my labor by hitting that like button and subscribe and sharing with as many people as possible. That, in turn, will inspire and encourage me to do more faster and get it out there for you here on this YouTube channel. Otherwise, as usual, stay connected. And that about sums it up.